The actor Heath Ledger was found dead today in an apartment here in New York.
The cinema erupted in applause. On the screen, the Joker laughed with a chaos that rattled the walls. His painted smile seared into memory. Yet beyond the light of the projector, in a quiet New York apartment, another kind of silence was waiting for Heath Ledger. A bedside lamp glowed dimly against bare walls. Scattered pages of a script lay abandoned, their ink smudged as though interrupted mid-thought. That contrast, the roar of the crowd against the hush of an empty room, became the haunting motif of his story. For Australians, Heath was more than a star. He was the boy from Perth who carried local pride into the heart of Hollywood. When ABC broke the news, it wasn't just about a famous actor. It was about a son of Australia, gone at only 28. Why does the world celebrate brilliance, only to watch it vanish so suddenly? Could the very role that made Heath immortal, the Joker, also be the shadow that closed in on him? This is not just the tale of a tragic end. It is the journey from ovations to silence, from a painted grin to an unanswered question. And it leaves us asking, what is the true cost of genius? Heath Ledger was more than a Hollywood star. He was our Heath, the boy from Perth who grew into a man the whole world couldn't look away from. He carried the charm of the suburbs, the salt air of the West Australian coast, into roles that reshaped cinema itself. He was a natural storyteller, a performer who learned early how to fill a screen with life. He was also a contradiction, a man who thrived under bright lights, yet sought quiet corners away from them. To fans, he seemed untouchable, the kind of figure whose rise felt unstoppable. But behind every ovation lingered a question. How much weight can one soul carry when the world demands everything? On the surface, he embodied triumph, a leading man who turned every part into revelation. From the young knight in armor to the outlaw challenging tradition, and finally, to the Joker, a role so dark, so unforgettable, it blurred the line between acting and haunting. But was his success a blessing or a burden? Did the painted smile that mesmerized millions also carve scars beneath the surface? Could the brilliance that brought him acclaim also bring him closer to collapse? Imagine watching him stride across the stage, every gesture fueled by confidence, unaware that history was already scripting its final act. Imagine the headlines, the whispers, the fragments of truth and rumor that followed. This is the paradox of Heath Ledger, a life defined by applause, shadowed by silence, and remembered in both light and darkness. Before he was the Joker, before the cameras and the chaos, Heath Andrew Ledger was simply a boy from Perth. Born in 1979, he grew up in a sunlit suburb where the Indian Ocean breeze carried into schoolyards and backyards. He was the son of Sally, a teacher of French, and Kim, a race car driver turned mining engineer. Ordinary roots. An ordinary boy, or so it seemed. Even as a child, Heath was restless. He loved chess, often carrying a board around, challenging anyone willing to play. He was drawn to performance too, staging little shows for friends in the living room. His first acting gig wasn't in front of a Hollywood camera, but in a school play at Guildford Grammar, where he donned costumes stitched together by his mum. Heath was never quite still. At just 10 years old, he would ride his bike down Perth streets, dreaming of worlds beyond the horizon. His mates remembered him as fearless, leaping from fences, diving into waves at Cottesloe Beach, always chasing the next thrill. That hunger for movement, for expression, for something larger, became his compass. But childhood was not without shadows. His parents divorced when he was young, splitting his world between two homes. Friends recalled how he carried a quiet weight even then, masking it with jokes and energy. Perhaps it was in those years that Heath learned his most enduring role: how to wear a facade, how to keep parts of himself hidden, even as he dazzled others. At 17, he made a decision that would change everything. He packed a car, left Perth behind, and drove across the country with a best mate. No safety net, no mapped-out future. Only the stubborn belief that he was meant for something bigger. But little did he know, the journey that began with dusty highways and cheap motels would soon lead to Hollywood's brightest spotlight. And with it, shadows he could never have imagined. When Heath arrived in Sydney as a teenager, the city seemed impossibly large. He slept on couches, auditioned endlessly, and often faced rejection. Yet, within a few years, his persistence began to pay off. Roles in Australian television, Home and Away, Sweat, gave him early recognition. But it was only the beginning. By the late 1990s, Hollywood came calling. Heath landed a breakout role in 10 Things I Hate About You. He was only 19, yet his smirk, his defiance, his raw energy lit up the screen. Almost overnight, he became a global heartthrob. Teen magazines plastered his face on covers, crowds screamed his name outside premieres, and studio executives knew they had found something rare. But Heath wasn't interested in being typecast. He turned away from shallow stardom, choosing roles with edge and complexity. In The Patriot, he held his own alongside Mel Gibson. In Monsters Ball, he delivered a performance that critics described as quietly devastating. And then came Brokeback Mountain. Released in 2005, it was a film that reshaped cinema and conversations around the world. Heath's portrayal of Ennis Del Mar earned him an Academy Award nomination and a BAFTA win. The role was fragile yet fierce, filled with silences that spoke louder than words. Audiences wept. Critics hailed him as one of the finest actors of his generation. Crowds followed him everywhere. At premieres in Venice and Toronto, security struggled to hold back fans reaching for a glimpse, a photo, a touch. Some fainted. Others screamed until their voices gave out. Heath stood calmly in the middle of it, offering shy smiles. And sometimes, nothing at all. But with every triumph, the stakes grew higher. His choices became bolder, his performances darker. And then came the Joker in The Dark Knight, a role that would redefine not only his career, but cinema itself. The brighter the light, the deeper the shadow. Could anyone, even Heath, emerge unchanged from a character that demanded such darkness? Behind the glare of cameras and the deafening applause, Heath was quietly battling struggles that only a few close friends ever glimpsed. He was known for throwing himself fully into roles, living them beyond the set. Some friends recalled how he rarely switched off, carrying characters home long after the director had called cut. The Joker was no exception. According to interviews at the time, Heath admitted to sleepless nights while preparing for Gotham's villain. He filled notebooks with twisted thoughts, practiced unsettling voices, and locked himself in hotel rooms to refine the Joker's mania. It was artistry at its peak, but it came with consequences. Reports suggested he turned to prescription medicines just to find rest. Others disputed whether the role truly consumed him, but few denied the toll it took. There were other shadows too. His relationship with Michelle Williams, the mother of his daughter Matilda, had ended not long before. Friends said he was devastated, torn between the joy of fatherhood and the heartbreak of separation. Paparazzi hounded him relentlessly, their flashbulbs chasing him through New York streets, framing every step as scandal or story. Some whispered that fame itself was the burden. Others believed it was his restless nature, always pushing further, never content to stay still. Could it be both? Or was it simply the cost of genius? Brilliance burning faster than it could sustain. Whatever the truth, Heath's facade was beginning to crack. The same man who captivated millions with a painted smile was now hiding behind his own outer shell, masking exhaustion with quiet nods and half-hearted reassurances.
The actor Heath Ledger was found dead today in an apartment.
22nd January 2008. A cold afternoon in Manhattan. Outside, traffic rumbled along Broome Street, horns echoing between tall brick buildings. Inside one loft apartment, silence pressed against the walls. The curtains were half drawn, muting the winter light. A script lay open on the bed, pages from the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, the film he was still shooting. Nearby, bottles of prescribed medicines sat neatly on a bedside table. To a stranger, the scene looked ordinary. But to those who loved him, the details would become haunting. A masseuse arrived first, then a housekeeper. They expected routine. Instead, they found stillness. They tried to wake him, their voices rising with urgency. The room that had once been filled with Heath's restless energy was now unmoved, unresponsive. Emergency services were called. Sirens cut through the New York afternoon, blue lights flashing against red brick. Neighbors leaned from windows. Reporters gathered within minutes, the news spreading with a speed only modern media could allow. Perth woke up to the headlines. Sydney caught them on the evening bulletin. Australia's son, gone at 28. For a moment, he was just another figure in a city apartment. Anonymous, silent, still. Yet within hours, his name was on every screen, his face on every front page. The Joker's grin played on cinema screens around the world, even as the man behind it had slipped away. How could a life so vibrant, so celebrated, end so quietly? Was it exhaustion, accident, or something deeper? The questions would ripple out, unanswered, feeding a storm of speculation that refused to fade. In the days that followed, the world searched for answers. Official reports described an accidental interaction of medicines, a tragic end rather than anything deliberate. Coroners in New York confirmed it plainly. Multiple prescriptions combined in a way the body could not withstand. Yet the media rarely leaves it there. Newspapers splashed with headlines linking Heath's preparation for the Joker to his death. Some reports suggested the role had pushed him too far, into sleepless nights and dangerous exhaustion. Others disputed that claim, pointing out that he had wrapped filming months earlier and was already at work on a new project. Then came the rumors, whispered theories that circled endlessly. Some said heartbreak had weighed too heavily after his separation from Michelle Williams. Others hinted at pressures from fame, or from an industry that demanded more than anyone could give. And there were darker voices still, spinning conspiracies without evidence, each one adding to the noise. It left the world divided. Was Heath a victim of his own artistry, or simply of an unfortunate accident? Could the Joker's shadow really follow him beyond the set? Or was it just a myth created by those who wanted a story too haunting to resist? two narratives stood side by side. One of a gifted actor taken by tragic misfortune, the other of a genius consumed by the very role that made him immortal. And in that clash of stories lies the enduring mystery. Not just how Heath Ledger died, but why his passing still feels like an unanswered question. In the weeks that followed, the world mourned. But in Australia, the grief felt sharper, closer to home. Perth became a place of pilgrimage. Crowds gathered outside his childhood school, leaving flowers and handwritten notes. At the State Theatre, audiences stood in silence before screenings, a minute of quiet replacing the applause he once received. In Melbourne, Sydney, and across the country, tributes poured in. ABC replayed old interviews, reminding viewers of the shy teenager who had grown into a star. On the other side of the world, Hollywood prepared its own farewell. The Academy Awards would soon honor him with a posthumous Oscar for his role as the Joker, a golden statue that his family accepted on his behalf. His memorial in Perth was raw and unfiltered. Friends, fellow actors, and family stood together, sharing memories of the boy who once played chess in the schoolyard, who surfed at Cottesloe Beach, who dared to leave everything behind for a dream. They spoke not of a myth, but of a man, funny, restless, caring, complicated. For many Australians, his legacy is twofold. He showed that a kid from Western Australia could stand shoulder to shoulder with the greatest in cinema. And he left behind work so powerful that it continues to shape film, inspiring new generations of actors. Even now, when the Joker's laughter echoes in cinemas, a silence follows. Applause fades. And Australians remember Heath not only for the roles he played, but for the traces he left behind. In film, in culture, in memory. The cinema roared with applause. The Joker's grin burned across the screen. But in the quiet of that New York apartment, the applause had already faded. It is here that the story of Heath Ledger ends. Not in the chaos of Gotham, but in the stillness of a room, where light dimmed and silence remained. Heath's journey was one of contrasts. The boy from Perth who conquered Hollywood, the genius whose brilliance came at a cost, the painted smile that left behind an echo of sorrow. His legacy is not just a film role, or even an Oscar. It is the lingering reminder that even the brightest stars can burn out too soon. And so, the mystery loop closes. Was it the Joker that haunted him, or the world that demanded too much? Perhaps we will never know. But what we do know is this: Heath Ledger remains immortal on screen, even as his absence is still felt off it. Where were you when you first saw his Joker? What memory of Heath stays with you? Share your thoughts in the comments, because remembering keeps him alive, not just in film reels, but in the hearts of those who refuse to forget. In the end, the applause may have faded, but the silence that followed still carries his name.